Hello everybody, welcome to another video. This one is really special because we have a legend with us tonight here. We have the man who made Western animation wonderful again, dude. Like, ever since The Last Airbender, I haven't seen something as marvelous as what this guy took out of his pockets. And we have so many upcoming projects to talk about, and also couple interesting topics that we're going to be tackling tonight with this legend that I have right here. We have showrunner of the Castlevania Netflix series, creator of the Bootleg universe, Adi Shankar. How's it going, man? How are you doing?
So good.
So good.
So good. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Dude, so thankful to have you here tonight, that you're taking your time to be with us. And let's start with the elephant in the room, just to tackle it and, take it out of the slate. Castlevania, man, like the level of approval this got, like this series finale that was unexpected and was also so positively greeted by everyone. This was earth shattering. You just make Western animation relevant again. How do you feel about that?
Well, I wouldn't say that I did that. I played a role. There was a role that
there was a whole team behind it. Absolutely.
There's a whole team all over the world. And I don't even know if I would quite classify it as Western animation. I think we as a global community are becoming so interconnected.
Absolutely.
So to define something by geographic borders, I think is going to become more and more archaic as time goes on. When we pitched the show to Netflix back in 2015, I mean, no one could have foreseen that this would not just be successful, but span an entire business model. Because now there's like a whole vertical, there's like a lot of people trying to replicate this.
Absolutely.
So, it's really cool. When I moved to Los Angeles, like 11 years ago, I moved with the intention of making R-rated, adult-oriented animation. And then it happened. Somehow, kind of manifested, and now there's more of it happening.
Absolutely.
And what's really great about it is, I'm sorry, I just cut you off because you asked me a question. I just kind of steamrolled, and now I'm like hijacking. I can basically I'll talk for now 45 minutes straight. But what was I saying? The cool thing now, I think the fun thing is there was a barrier, I think, between like our generation and the generations above us, where they didn't necessarily view animation as one, as an art form, and two, as a medium. They looked at it as a genre, which is really weird, and kind of I don't understand how the mental gymnastics one has to go through to view animation as genre, not a medium, right? So when you look at most international / Western animation, it was like all comedies. It was like things like Simpsons and Family Guy, which is fine. I mean, there's a place for that.
Yeah.
But there's so much more that animation can do and can be. And I think now with the proliferation of it, and the fact that distribution is no longer this uphill battle that it used to be back when like a handful of TV networks controlled the pipeline, I think now is when it's going to get interesting. Like, now you can get kind of weird, and that's what I want to do. Get weird,
It's slowly becoming more serious. I think so. Like, just like you said, like back in our days, we would watch like Looney Tunes, and the most like serious things we would see in terms of animation were probably those old school superhero series, like the Batman and Robin animation, Justice League and whatnot. And you mentioned a really important word, and is that after you did this and it went out successfully, people start trying it as well. So you just built a trend. You're just inspiring people and creating.
I didn't build it myself. I mean, this was a big team. I don't want to take it all.
Absolutely.
in a way, it's like right place, right time. Like I was there. There were other people there, the fact of the matter is, someone would have done this.
Yes.
Whether it was, they would have done this at some point, because this was a long time coming. And this, by the way, this isn't like the first, adult animated, sophisticated
adult graphic novel
show
brought to life.
Yeah, this was something that was brewing in the underground for years, decades even, that popped in the mainstream really because of like changing distribution models. It went on Netflix, so it showed up in a bunch of people's houses, right? Like, had this been like 10 years ago, this wouldn't have made its way onto any platform where people could have discovered it. And I think that is the key to this. There was like a discovery element that caused it to have a reach beyond,
and bring a whole new audience into it.
Exactly. And I also think simultaneously, sorry, I got you off. You should go.
Yeah. No, I was going to mention that the fact that you guys pulled it off so greatly with this animation actually brought people's interest into an animation that they didn't even know was about a video game to begin with. And that kind of makes them gravitate towards video games and what origin stories were behind there whatsoever. And I think that's a really interesting effect that happens, and how now in the modern times, and given that we went through a whole pandemic and people had to find new hobbies to do from home and all that, many people actually gravitated towards video games, and I think that was like a wonderful contribution to it.
Interesting. I have the opposite viewpoint.
You do,
which is which is, so again, when you go older and older and older and older within the population, you have generations of people whose access to media was completely controlled and programmed, right? Like you have a generation where there were 3 TV channels and that's it. You had a generation that like got most of their pop culture information from magazines at the grocery store, and that's it, right? So as you go younger and younger and younger, with people who organically grew up through the internet, there's a lot of depth there, because you can deep dive into anything that you love and find out everything that there is to know about it, and really become an expert of sorts. And I feel like video games and anime, two of these things, are very conducive to this kind of apparatus. I guess the best word to call it is an apparatus. It's very conducive to this kind of apparatus, right? So, video games were growing exponentially before the pandemic, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, Fortnite became a cultural phenomenon out of nowhere, as did PUBG. Those are relatively new brands. And I would take it even maybe a step further and ask you a question just to illustrate a point. Can you name like a couple original franchises that Hollywood has created, the movie industry has created, since The Matrix? Just absolutely wholly new since The Matrix. It's a thing, like cultural phenomenon since The Matrix.
Yes, that's a really, really difficult question. Now that you mentioned that, like if we're gonna talk like The Matrix level, I don't think they have made a lot or any at that point. You know, like maybe if you delve into indie film industries and all that, you could maybe take one or two. But yeah, The Matrix was definitely unbeatable. Right.
So, traditional media legacy media has done a really bad job of building new franchises and experiences that make people care. In the last 15 years, at the same time this is happening, all the new brands that have an audience emotionally invested came from the gaming space.
Absolutely true.
Right? Because if I say name 5 new games that came about that no one had ever heard of that like became called. You could name 5 like right now, and I can name 5, and they probably wouldn't be the same.
Absolutely
Right?
true. Absolutely true.
So I think this trend of games, gaming, the culture of gaming, engulfing this amoeba that was once Hollywood started long before the pandemic. The pandemic just accelerated.
Totally true. Yeah, I think it's like a really difficult endeavor. Bringing video games, and I will also throw in their Japanese animation, bringing them into series and movies and making them come out right. You get what I'm saying? It's really difficult.
Disagree.
You do?
I disagree. Yeah.
Yeah,
I disagree.
I love it. I love it. We're literally having a debate here. Let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, okay. You've heard of Dark Souls, right?
Absolutely.
And you've heard of Mega Man?
Yeah.
Dark Souls, Mega Man. They're both video games.
Mm-hmm.
But other than being classified as video games, they have nothing in common.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're completely different properties, tones, worlds, like everything about these two things.
Well, they do have in common that they destroy your mental health. They're absurdly difficult.
Sure. I don't feel like there's one way to adapt. The point I'm making is there's not one way to adapt a game or to like translate a game into a narrative series, right? So it's not, I don't think it's like organically difficult. It's just these things are all radically different. It's not like a comic book where you're like, okay, kind of get this character and like, okay, it's kind of a story. Like some games have no story. Some games are all stories. Some games are just a world. Some games are just a character. Some games are just a game type. They're just a game engine, or not just. I don't want to be reductive, but they're a game engine, right? So sometimes when you're like adapting it into a movie or a series, like sometimes you are translating, sometimes you're adapting, sometimes you are creating an extension of the lore. Sometimes there are no two exercises here that are like the same. And I feel like with anime, it's like a little bit different because again, this is a narrative medium, right? But I feel like in the past, when it's been adapted or translated into a live action thing for Western audiences, it's not just that there was a dumbing down that happened. It was almost like a rejection of the tropes of anime that made these things unwatchable. But I do not believe that it is inherently difficult to take an anime property and adapt it into something else. Adapt it into a kind of a live action series. I don't think there's like a fundamental like difficulty level that's greater than taking like a beloved novel and adapting it to something else. It was just the methodology and the apparatus of the film business was structured in such a way that it was manifesting.
Became a bit pragmatic.
Yes.
So you would say it's more a thing of like your creative approach and the standpoint with which you look at it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. So there is one last question I want to ask you, just so we can take Castlevania off the slate and we can start talking about the future, right? Of all these old school video games that you guys could have made amazing animated series of, why did you guys choose Castlevania?
Well, as you pointed out, like there's other, it's not like there's other. I don't have a good answer to that.
You don't?
I don't know. I could, yeah. I think it was more like I was kind of walking around and it just kind of all happened.
It just kind of happened. That's how it happens the best. Like spontaneity and like when it comes to art, being spontaneous is actually a good thing in my opinion.
Well, what you asked me wasn't an art question. What you asked me was like almost a business question in a way, right? It's like what are with the choices? Because it's about the choices, as well as the
more like why was it a Castlevania animated series when it could have been like a Metroid animated series? You get my point? So maybe your like the creativity of the whole team and the creative ideas were smoother and ringing better with the whole Castlevania universe and vampires, monsters, vampire hunters, werewolves, as opposed to maybe like a more space, sci-fi, cyberpunk stuff. You know,
I think you're reading into it. I think you're reading into something, and I see your point, right? But I go back to what I was saying earlier, which is, okay, now that we've crossed the Castlevania bridge, I don't mean like personally, I mean as a society, like, okay, great. Animation is not seen as a genre. It's now understood to be a medium. Mm-hmm. There's a growing, exponentially growing tribe and community who really want authentic nerd culture delivered in a way that's artful and thoughtful and crafted in a manner that doesn't try to reduce something into a mass pop culture 4-quadrant piece of content. Now that we've crossed that bridge, I think now this is where it gets a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I do agree with that. So let's talk about the bootleg universe, because this is like your baby. This is where you actually took risks, let's to say the least. I've seen you have a lot of bootleg universe fan made shorts. I've seen the one from Pokemon. You have one for James Bond. You also have one for
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers. I think you have
which
one
is like the oddball, which is the oddball one, Mr. Rogers. I love when, because I make people list Mr. Rogers. They're like, and he does these really dark retellings of brands like The Punisher, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Pokemon, Venom, Mr. Rogers. And people are like, wait, what? Mr. Rogers.
And I loved it. Like, my personal favorite was the Pokemon one, because you just brought something that is supposed to be for kids. You brought it to a more gory, adult-esque fashion. And like you make these scenes and these animations that make Pokemon like far more realistic, far more crude. And I really love it. So tell us a bit more about the project as a whole.
So there's an American football player named Michael Vick. He was on the cover of Madden 2004. Now, I don't watch sports. I'm not like a sports person, but I played that video game, and he was really good at running. So, he's a quarterback, so he's the guy who like throws the ball. And I don't like playing sports games the way that someone actually plays the sport. So I would just kind of run around, the whole thing. Michael Vick ended up going to jail for illegal dogfighting at kind of the height of his athletic career. So when I thought about it, I'm like, how is that any different than Pokemon?
True.
Right? If there was a government body that was like, no, it's okay to make dogs fight. In fact, so then you're kind of like, all of a sudden, wait, dogs are fighting in stadiums? What? You have people like you have like young kids like Ash Ketchum being like, yeah, I'm training my, like they going to gyms to get better at teaching dogs how to fight. I thought that was kind of funny, like in terms of like, hey, Pokemon is really this thing. And then I was like, okay, well, what if there's like an economic incentive like there is in a lot of our society constantly, right? There's like economic incentives to turn a blind eye towards certain things, right? So like in the US, I mean, there's so many like social inequalities and injustices that society at large and the media at large kind of turn a blind eye towards because it's profitable and because there's an economic, again, apparatus around it that fuels a subsection of society. So it's like, well, what if these Pokemon battles are so economically viable or economically not even viable? They're like an economic necessity. So, someone speaking out against them could theoretically have ripple effects throughout the economy. And that's really where it came from. It was like like all the other short films that are,
yes, absolutely,
satirical takes on franchises. That's just what that was. It wasn't designed to like continue beyond that one short film.
Absolutely,
and it's really not even a short film in that regard. It's like the other thing that I love doing is using other mediums, like actual mediums that aren't traditionally storytelling mediums, as a storytelling medium. So in the Pokemon instance, we used a trailer. We used the trope and the format of the American movie trailer to tell this story, which is something I always wanted to do.
Do you have any other bootleg universe videos on the kitchen?
Yeah, Guardians of Justice.
Absolutely, that's what
totally a bootleg universe thing. It's going on Netflix, so I guess to that extent, it's not. I mean, my distribution strategy for that is not, hey, let's throw it on YouTube, but it's
absolutely
the same. It's the same thing, right?
Absolutely.
It's like,
but it's a big step, like from just plans of just releasing it into YouTube as opposed to getting it released on Netflix. Is definitely one of the advantages of the whole online distribution apparatus, as you said earlier.
Right.
So tell us about Guardians of Justice. What can we expect from that? Tell us about it. What's up with it?
I've been working on it for 6.5 years.
Wow.
That's fucking insane. That's fucking crazy. Like, who does that? Well, I guess Terrence Malick does that, but other than Terrence Malick, who does that? Man, I don't know. I set out to do something different and original, and I was trying to not look at everything that came before it and just copy. And I was trying to challenge myself and push myself and really see, hey, where are my limits? Where are my own limits? That, caused me to hit my breaking point many times, which is, again, insane, because who does that other than crazy people? I guess if you look at the one image that because it's playing at Cannes in 2 weeks, the one image that Cannes released, you'd think it's, hey, this is a superhero show, but it's not really a superhero show. Not a superhero show at all.
No.
And it is really what it is it's an extension of the bootleg universe series, right? It's like, I just was like, hey, I want to do something with this. I want to not with this. I want to keep playing in the sandbox. And this allowed me to do that. And it's a hybrid. So it's not live action or animation. It's both, and it's multiple styles of animation as well. And I couldn't have done it without the knowledge and skill sets that I acquired and amassed, like a role playing game, right? Like on The Witcher, I'm going back and like learning skills, but instead of like magic potions, the skills are like, oh, now I know how to work in animation. Now I know how to work in.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it was like taking the knowledge that I'd had just through my own experiences, and also, the litany of mentors that I've had throughout my career. Like, it's been insane how many masters just were so forthcoming and gracious with information in a way that I didn't appreciate at the time.
Yes, absolutely.
I just didn't, because when you're young, you don't appreciate it. But I'm like, I was looking back, and I'm like, that is insane that person, Marjane Satrapi, who, is a revered artist, and as an example, revered artist, made a movie called Persepolis that everyone should watch. It's insane that masters were so gracious with their information and time. There wasn't like any weirdness.
We did not deserve them. We really do not deserve them. Like masters and mentors that takes a special type of calling. For you to feel fulfilled by teaching others is really, really a big thing as a human being.
Yeah. I've been trying to pay that forward. Like I find people online, like the duo, the directing duo, but also the studio that made the Pokemon short. They're called Angry Metal, and they're based in Spain. These are guys that I met on the internet, like in 2012.
Yeah,
and as one example, and I'm not getting into the intricacies of my relationship with them and how vital they've been to the process of, well, even completing Guardians of Justice, because that wouldn't have been able to be completed without them. But yeah, it's crazy. So Guardians of Justice kind of takes everything that came before it for me and is like,
yeah, like every piece of your story as a creative person was right. A butterfly effect towards what Guardians of Justice is about to show us.
The way you just said that, I need to
write it down.
I need to write that down. You said that. Oh my God. And you used the word butterfly. That's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that movie. Like, anything that involves like time traveling and the consequences of it, because it's not something we entirely understand as a society yet. If it were possible, what the consequences be, and what will be like the selfish desires behind it. But yeah, totally. Like that is a really, really interesting topic behind it.
I don't know if I agree with that.
You don't? Let's see. Let's hear it.
So do you know how physicists say that time doesn't exist?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like a theory. You're like, what does that mean? I don't get it. Like I woke up yesterday and it was Thursday and today's Friday, so time does exist, right? Like for us, it's going linearly, but from a physics perspective, time does not exist. So so everything's kind of happening at the same time, right? So yesterday happened at the same time as today happened, is the same thing as tomorrow, at the same thing as 1,000 years ago, at the same time as 1,000 years from now. We are just experiencing time linearly, like it's a progression, but it doesn't exist. So by going by that theory, that logic, that train of thought, if time travel is going to exist at any point, it has always existed. Therefore, it exists.
That makes sense. I mean, it's like from a standpoint perspective, it does make a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So, Eddie, let's talk about Captain Laserhawk, because that's one of the upcoming projects that you have on the cooks.
Right, with my good friends over at Ubisoft.
Absolutely. I've heard that you have really good relationships over there, which is about to bring some more questions on that matter. For those who don't know in the audience, Captain Laserhawk, Blood Dragon Remix. Blood Dragon was a DLC from Far Cry 3. And yeah, we're in the midst of the hype of Far Cry 6, man. Like we have Gustavo Esposito himself in there showing us how to do it right. So tell us a bit about what you have in mind for Captain Laserhawk, because as far as I've understood, it's like really different from what we saw in the video game back then, like 2012 to 2013. So let's hear it. Let's talk about that.
So without spoiling anything.
Absolutely not.
I've created a wholly new retro futuristic cyberpunk IP for Ubisoft that remixes several Ubisoft properties into a new way. So I guess the comp here would be the comp would be Elseworlds. Remember the Elseworlds comics
Absolutely.
from DC, where it's like alternate takes and
parallel universes. Absolutely.
Right, totally. So, development's over. We're in production. There's an exceptionally talented director named Mehdi directing the project. There's a studio called Bobby Pills. They're acting as the animation studio. And the project is called Captain Laserhawk: A Blood Dragon Remix, right? And as you pointed out, Blood Dragon was a DLC spin-off from the Far Cry series, so that's where the association with the Far Cry brand comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, it's using like a Blood Dragon kind of vibe remix thing. It's not just Blood Dragon. There's other things, other properties in the mix. So I think the other thing that I compared this to is there was a kids show that was not very good, but looked awesome, called Captain N, the Game Masters.
Okay.
And it was, so if you look it up, Captain N, the Game Masters. And it's amazing because this was like, Nintendo made it. So it was like Metroid, Zelda, and then they also had other brands in there, like Castlevania was in it, Mega Man was in it, but these weren't like accurate takes. Like Mega Man was green, and like Simon Belmont from Castlevania was like a narcissist. So it was like it was almost like someone got this entire treasure trove of all the greatest gaming stuff ever and went, let's like completely change it all. And that was it's something I compare it to. It's not really that, because I'm trying to make something good. But I fondly remember Captain N, because I didn't know what I was watching, and I thought, wow, when I was very young. I mean, you're talking like
absolutely,
5 years old. When you're 5 years old, you don't know what you're watching. You have like no idea. You also don't have the reference point, so you're like, oh, I don't know. You don't know.
You're just enjoying it in a really innocent way,
right? And you're lacking context.
Absolutely. And I also say that the fact that a movie or a series is not necessarily good by the book doesn't mean you cannot enjoy it. Because there were like many bad movies back then that were not the best from the cinematic standpoint, but I did enjoy them. Like maybe because there was no context back then. I haven't read like reference material, comics, books behind it or anything like that. But
sure,
you do enjoy them. Totally.
And I think there's some movies like the Wachowski Speed Racer movie that even the ecosystem around that movie kept reiterating the narrative that this is not a good movie. This is bad. What's wrong with these people? You look back at that movie now and you're like, what the fuck were you all talking about?
Yeah. So
this movie's genius. What is wrong with it, right? And I think there's also like simultaneously, like, this is changing, it's evolving, but so much of like what's considered good or bad is just so subjective. It's just so subjective. But we had a critical mechanism, like a critic mechanism, that needed to categorize things in order for someone to win and someone to lose, and to like build almost like to turn art and entertainment into a sporting spectacle. So it felt like a sporting event, like, oh, who's going to win the box office this week? And you're like, what the fuck? Like, this is crazy. Like, why are you all fixated on how much actors are making like it's a sport, and what movie like won the crazy to me. But and thankfully that's since eroded, which is great. But yeah, like that was like a whole thing.
Yeah,
like a whole thing back in the day.
It actually was.
Yeah, so it's like, it's really cool to be able to work with Ubisoft in the manner in which I'm getting to work with them.
Mhm.
Because they're such an artist friendly company in all my interactions with every executive there. And Captain Laserhawk was kind of a weird one for me in a way because I didn't think it would happen. You know how like any self help guru will tell you think positively, manifest. I was not thinking positively at all the whole time. I was like,
Mhm.
no, this is not going to happen. Someone's going to like tap me on the shoulder and be like, nope, Addy, no, you can't do this. And that never happened. And it's still continuing. And now the show looks more and more awesome every week. And I can't wait to show it to everybody because yeah, like what the hell? This is amazing. And we have like amazing collaborators. It's just so rad. So yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. We, as artists, we are so
Yeah.
at times we are so overly critical of what we do. Like we're our own
Right.
worst enemy, and we're so overly
Sure.
critical of what we do. So much so that whenever you come up with something that you feel like people's gonna like it, you feel it in your gut, you feel proud about it. There is definitely something magical happening to it, and that hypes me even more about it. So Addy, we do have a little more time, like for one more question, and I want to make it, I want to make it count. I want to make it substantial, because for those who don't know in the audience, Addy is a guy that has had his experiences and has his knowledge about the topic of mental health, something that we all, as artists, professionals, content creators, you name it, we all struggle with it. We all struggle with that crippling self-doubt. We struggle with people's approval, people's abusive criticism and all that. So tell us a bit about it. You're the psychologist here. Let's go for it.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I'm not a psychologist. But I have been through the ringer with all this stuff, everything you listed. And I didn't have the tools nor the vocabulary to navigate it for years. And in a way, that's kind of what Guardians of Justice is about. It's about mental health partially. I don't know how to speak to it in a coherent, cohesive manner because I could literally just talk for 2 hours. Is there a specific aspect of it that you want me to address?
Let's do it more from the artistic standpoint and the kind of stuff we deal with as artists and self-doubt.
So self-doubt is interesting because I came to realize self-doubt is just ego.
True. You could put it that way.
It's literally just ego, right? Because your feelings and emotions, at least in the way I look at it, they're like oscillations. So someone that has crippling self-doubt will also have moments of
greatness,
like almost a bravado, right? And both of them are illusions. Because, on one level, like what is self-doubt? Self-doubt is like projecting onto other people and institutions and like, oh, I'm not as good as I say. I'm like, what does that mean exactly? What do you mean you're not as good as, like, what are you talking about? Like it's like your life is a kaleidoscope of sounds and images. And then what we do is construct a narrative around that. We're like telling ourselves, we're constantly telling ourselves the story about ourselves back to ourselves. And then we're playing this character that we're telling ourselves that we are. And so as crazy as this sounds, because it sounded insane to me before I really kind of understood it and integrated it, self-doubt is just ego.
Yeah, and I think that given the way things have evolved in terms of distribution, like for musicians, filmmakers, animators, voice actors, composers, all of that, I think there is a lot more people fighting for the audience's attention, and that creates like this overly competitive environment in it. and you just
Sure,
Mhm.
but attachment to a result never works.
And that's a really
Because the
big
other way
push
of
right
looking
there.
at it, because look at it this way. I disagree with what you just said. I don't think that there's anybody fighting. Our artists are not in competition with one another. Corporations are in competition with one another, and sometimes they hire artists to make competing products. But at the end of the day, like, your voice as an artist is your own. It's not like replicable. Sure, there may be some similarities here and there, but those are kind of surface level, because no two, just as like no two souls are the same and no two people are exactly the same, no two artists are the same. So what you're trying to do as an artist is like authentically express yourself in a way that other people connect to you, or connect to
Yes.
your experiences, or connect to some part of who you are.
Yeah,
And
I love how you said it, that corporations hire us to make competitive products. That's a way of organizing things in a really positive fashion.
yeah, I mean, it is. Art is fundamentally a positive thing, right? And I think the issue comes from ego.
Yeah.
The issue comes from being overly tied to a result and attached to a result, right? Like, I have to be the biggest, as an example, I have to be the biggest artist ever. Like, okay, what does that mean exactly? What, like, that's not a metric that you can actually define, because just as an example, right? Time erodes everything. Time erodes everything. And this should scare the shit out of all of us, but at the same time, also liberate us, because
Yes.
time erodes everything. Do you know who the biggest celebrities were in Victorian London?
No, absolutely not.
Bare knuckle boxers. Bare knuckle boxers. They were the David Beckham of the day, the Tom Cruise of the day was a bare knuckle boxer. And then all of a sudden, bare knuckle boxing went away. It doesn't exist today. And these people are all forgotten, all of them. There's no
Yes.
one writing about them. There's no one singing songs about them. They don't, they're not remembered. And so you may be the number one person in some vertical making some kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, society at some point, 10, 20, 50 years down the road, just stops caring about the thing. And then even the legacy, if you're doing this for legacy, the legacy might just simply not even be there, and no one will care. And so there's no way to control any of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely true.
And the more attached you are to it, to any outcome, the more you're trying to control outcomes and really society at large, which again, that's ego. You can't do that.
Yeah.
None of us have the ability to really do that in a permanent, lasting way.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes so much sense when you put it that way. I love it.
So all you can do is take a piece of you, find your voice, take a piece of you, put it in your palm and go, blow it out into the world, and someone will react to it. Now, they may react to it today. They might react to it 1,000 years from now. You don't know the ripple effects of what you're creating. You don't know the ripple effects what you're creating will have.
Yes, absolutely true.
Right? You might fucking write a poem today that no one gives a shit about, and you die, and you're 1,000 years go by, and it's like written on some thumb drive somewhere, and like the internet's been deleted, and then all of a sudden someone reads that poem and it causes a revolution 1,000 years from now.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Absolutely,
you have no idea.
Love it. Look, dude, like you have such a mature and positive standpoint about it. I love it, really. So, guys, we are pretty much out of time already.
We are. Yeah.
Anything else you want to say for the audience, Eddie?
No, I am. I'm super out of it today. Super out of it. I was like up till like I knew we had this talk.
Well,
but I decided to stay up till like 4.
That happens, man. That happens.
Yeah,
man.
yeah, I did that. I was just kind of writing random stuff. So, but I appreciate you kind of guiding me through this with your amazing questions and your positivity and your passion for all things nerd.
I do appreciate it even more. And it seems like you and I both absorbed like the vampirism from the Castlevania series, staying up until 4 a.m. So, guys, thank you so much for sticking up to the end of the video. Be sure to check Captain Laserhawk when it comes out. When does it come out, Addy?
Not for a little bit.
Not for a little bit. Well, but do stay
We're still
tuned.
in production. We're still in production, but still stay tuned. Guardians of Justice, or also known as the Guardians of Justice Will Save You. That will be in Cannes in 2 weeks. So you can kind of look out for that, or follow me on Instagram, where I post selfies of myself with makeup.
What your Instagram handle is?
Bootleg Universe.
Bootleg Universe. That's correct. Yeah. And we're gonna have it down here as well on the once the video is released. So guys, thank you so much for staying here, Addy. It's been such a pleasure for us having you here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the pleasure's been all mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of your enlightenment, all of your wisdom, and all of your kind words that you've said here today. I do appreciate it so much. So, guys, have a good one. Check you on the next one.